Where did you get that? She asked in shock. Really? I show you a clear picture of you passionately kissing another man on the dance floor with his hand on your breast and your hand on his ass. And the very first thing you have to say is to ask where I got it? Does it matter where I got it? Would my answer to your question alter the fact that you're cheating on me with him? I asked my wife of 7 years. Honey, I know it looks bad, and I admit that we did kiss, but it's not cheating. As you can see in the picture, we're out in the open with many others. We weren't having sex, obviously, she volleyed. So, that's your primary defense? No explanation about who you're kissing so passionately nor why? You assume that since you aren't fucking him in this picture on the dance floor, then everything's perfectly okay? I need to know, Tracy. Is this your definition of honoring your wedding vows? Brian, I can see that you're very upset over this. It's nothing for you to worry about, I swear. We were simply caught up in the moment and it happened. You need not have any concern about this. You're not helping things by blowing something innocent out of proportion, she said emphatically. Innocent out of proportion? You still haven't even told me his name. Why should I be upset about someone I don't even know? I spat sarcastically. Does it matter what his name is? If I told you, you might go and do something stupid like picking a fight and he'd wipe the floor with you. I won't let that happen, she countered. I see. Thank you for your honesty and transparency. You've made your choice. So now I'll make mine, I responded heatedly. I turned around, bounded up the stairs, and began packing a suitcase to last me about a week. She followed quickly. What are you doing? What does it look like I'm doing? Packing a suitcase, but why? Because I can't tolerate another minute of your lies and deceit. I need to get away and do some thinking before I say or do something to you that I might regret, I seethed. Don't be silly, Brian. I know you'd never hit me in a million years. Well, until today, I knew you'd never cheat on me in a million years, so I guess we must not know each other as well as we thought. Cheat? Who said I cheated on you? Tracy shouted. Kissing him wasn't cheating on you, and you know it. I never cheated on you. And there it is, I said sarcastically. There's what? The blatant lie. But I never lied to you, Brian. I did not cheat on you with him or anyone else, she yelled. Oh, then what do you call this? And I handed her another picture taken that same night. That's a rather nice shot of you sucking his prick, wouldn't you say? And in case you try to pull a Bill Clinton on me and say cocksucking isn't sex, how about this one? His prick appears to be buried deep inside your cunt, doesn't it? But where? How? There you go again. Does it matter where I got that picture or how I came by it? Would that knowledge somehow alter the fact that you did cheat on me and just now lied to my face about it? She dropped the pictures to the floor and began sobbing as she tried to hug her husband. Stay away from me, Tracy. Communication is a two-way street. I've given you the chance to be honest with me about everything and come clean, but you must not deem me worthy of the truth. I might have stayed and tried to talk through this with you for the sake of our son, if you'd only been honest, but it appears as though that's asking too much of you. I'm taking my phone. If you call me even a single time for any reason other than an emergency with little Bobby, I'll block your number. Am I clear about that? She nodded her head and I walked out fuming, disappointed and hurt beyond measure. This was Friday night as I checked into the motel. I figured I'd take the weekend to consider my next steps. Were I to divorce her, which was my instinctive impulse, then Bobby would come from a broken home and I'd end up paying child support and alimony. Basically, I'd be paying her to have sex with other men. I wish she'd have given me some kind of explanation or an apology at least. Perhaps she hadn't had time to think. That's why I thought it best for us to be apart and think about the direction our lives will go from here. The absence of my wife and son impacted me greatly, and the loneliness was intolerable. I cried myself to sleep. Shortly before noon the next day, the texts started rolling in. After receiving my college engineering degree a while back, I was employed by a local chemical laboratory, which was the packaging facility for a large chemical concern. After 5 years of paying my dues there, I was offered employment as facility manager for their flagship research and development center 1,000 miles away. With increased responsibility came a very significant pay increase, so we jumped at the chance, uprooted, and made the move. We both left all of our friends and family behind. Tracy took a job at a call center for a large credit card company. There were over 1,200 employees at the call center, most of whom were women Tracy's age. A year after our move, little Bobby was welcomed into the world. I encouraged her to become a stay-at-home mom, as I was well paid, but she loved the company of her work friends. Her work friends quickly became our friends. We were part of a loose group of 6 to 12 couples who would get together bi-monthly on average, sometimes at a home, often at a restaurant or club. The girls were her co-workers, and the guys, like me, consisted of their husbands. That's not to say that I had no friends where I worked, but Tracy worked tirelessly to see to it that our social calendar consisted primarily of her co-worker group. I had no objections as they all were nice enough. The women were all stunningly attractive as well as the husbands. I almost felt out of place with the debonair and dashing men of the group, but they all treated me the same as the others. It was primarily from this group that my current barrage of texts consisted. It was clear that Tracy had not only informed them that we were having problems, but she had told them the details, and they were all urgently requesting that I give them an audience to help quickly diffuse the situation. I shook my head in amazement at how she had kept her tryst secret from me, yet freely shared the details with our friends. Now I was wondering what kind of friends they truly were. I detest other people knowing my business, especially regarding my personal life and intimate details of my marriage. This situation, in and of itself, was unsettling to me. About the only person who hadn't called or texted me was Tracy. She knew I'd make good on my promise to block her. Cassidy seemed to be spearheading everything from what I gathered. She was Tracy's best friend, and they were thick as thieves. She wanted me to meet up with the group at her house Sunday evening at 6 o'clock. My analytical mind surmised that it may be some kind of a trap. My car could get blocked, or the guys try to prevent my escape should I decide to leave the meeting before they wished me to. I texted back that I'd meet them at the Angus Steakhouse restaurant instead, take it or leave it. I could park my car where it couldn't be blocked and in the public restaurant setting, leave whenever I wished. Reluctantly, they acceded to my request. I agreed to the meeting for a couple of reasons. One was to perhaps get some answers as to why Tracy did what she had done. Secondly, I was curious about what our friends thought about infidelity. Whose side would they be on? And thirdly, I wondered if any of them were somehow complicit in her tryst. Did they know? Did they set it up? If they were aware of her extracurricular activity, none of them had shared their concerns with me. I never back down from confrontation. I deal with nearly every kind of problem imaginable as a facility manager and can comport myself well in practically any setting. I looked forward to learning more to enable me to make an informed decision or put them in their place. I left my car in the parking lot of a nearby store and walked over to the restaurant. I gathered that the group had arrived much earlier than our agreed time to discuss strategy and prepare for the confrontation. This amused me. There was only one seat at the arranged table, and it was next to Tracy. She immediately rose to meet me as I approached. I stopped her before she made it to me. If it's all right, I'd just as soon sit at the far end of the table away from her if you all don't mind. But if you do mind, then I can comfortably sit at another table, I explained. Cassidy quickly spoke before Tracy had a chance to respond. Of course, that's fine, Brian. Jared, how about giving Brian your seat at the end of the table? Please, Brian, have a seat. You're our guest tonight, so your dinner is already paid for. Why don't we all go ahead now and place our orders? Our group was in a separate dining area of the restaurant utilized for overflow seating. They must have arranged to secure it for privacy. Everyone placed their orders quickly, and that task was out of the way. Before allowing Cassidy or anyone else to take control of this talk, I was determined to get at least one answer before going any further. I passed out 2 copies of the picture of Tracy and the mystery man kissing on the dance floor, one to my left and the other to my right. I opened. All of you seem keenly interested in Tracy and me resolving our differences. I was shocked beyond belief that she would tell our personal business to anyone else before she and I had ample opportunity to discuss it ourselves, but that only showcases her continuing disrespect for me and our marriage. Cassidy moved to speak, but I interrupted her. Before any discussion of any kind takes place, I want an answer, and I want it right now. Take a good look, all of you, at that picture. Tracy is passionately kissing another man. She refuses to give me his name. I am certain that at least one of you here knows who he is. You all say you want to help us resolve our issues? Well, The help I need most right now is information. If none of you can be honest with me right now and provide the facts as they are, then we have nothing else to discuss. There was complete silence at the table. Not even the loquacious Cassidy was moved to speak. Not a single one of them offered to say that they didn't know the man, nor did they offer to say who he was. I had my response. Thank you for your time. I hope someone's very hungry and can eat my steak. I just lost my appetite. It appears as though no one here is truly interested in helping us repair our relationship after all. Excuse me. And I rose from the table and walked away. Tracy called after me, begging me to return, but no one else did. It was evident that our friends were her friends and not mine. Tracy, Cassidy, and the group were stunned. They had planned on having a reasonable discussion with me, but I'd blindsided the whole meeting with my stubborn demand. Serious strategizing would be required to reach me, which they were unprepared to do at the moment. I hadn't mentioned it at the restaurant, but I had already checked out of the motel. I went through the drive-thru of a fast food joint and picked up some eats. Upon my arrival home, I spoke with our babysitter that Tracy had engaged for the evening, paid her, and thanked her for her services. Next, I gulped my food down and made quick work of relocating my clothing and personal items to the spare bedroom. I had already visited a local hardware store over the weekend and picked up a pair of identically keyed lock sets similar to the ones on our front and back doors. I installed them on the spare bedroom and hall bathroom doors, keeping the only keys, not to avoid verbal confrontations with Tracy, but I didn't want her trying to physically seduce me in the shower or the middle of the night when I was asleep. Once settled in, I played joyfully with my 3-year-old son, who was the light of my life, before bathing him and putting him down for the night. Tracy had to realize I was home because my car was in the garage when she pulled in at 10:15 p.m. They must have had quite the brainstorming session. Either that or she was with her lover again, and I truly had no idea which was the truth, sad as that may sound. She excitedly ran upstairs, gleeful for my return, finding me in Bobby's room sitting in a chair watching my son peacefully sleep, while tears streamed down my face. I shushed her and waved her off before she entered the room. No need to disturb his innocent slumber. After I quietly closed his door, she moved to hug me and I thwarted her. Undaunted, she was grinning from ear to ear as she said, "I'm so glad you're home, back where you belong. Let me fix you something to eat. We have a lot to talk about." "I've already eaten, but thanks for the offer. So where were you all this time? Entertaining your lover again?" I implied. "No, I just left the steakhouse. They can verify that. They have been helping me find the right words to get us back on track. I have so much to say to you," she explained. "I'll talk to you about anything you want after you give me your lover's name. If you can't do that, then we have nothing to talk about." I just can't," she said morosely. "I wish you had half the loyalty to me, your husband, that you hold for your lover. I'll be staying in the spare bedroom until further notice. Please stay away from me and don't ever touch me. Who knows what disgusting diseases you're carrying now? But I won't allow your slutting around to keep me away from my son any longer. He needs me every bit as much as he needs you. If you ever decide you're ready to talk, your next words to me will be your lover's name. But if you're willing to sacrifice our marriage to protect him, then so be it. However, I don't want you to speak another word to me until you are ready to give up your lover's name. For all I know, you're making arrangements behind my back to take our son and move in with him tomorrow." She walked away sobbing with her head down. A week had gone by where Tracy and I happily interacted with Bobby, but sadly, not a word to each other. Finally, on Monday evening after work, I encountered quite a surprise when I returned home. Nothing looked amiss before I walked in the door, but I suppose they wanted to surprise me. After I walked into the kitchen to see what was for supper, a crowd of people came in from adjoining rooms and surrounded me. It was Tracy's friend couples group. It seemed they were all there and were excited and anxious to see me again. Nothing was said to cause any angst, but I sensed they were walking on eggshells. The first words out of my mouth were, "Where's Bobby?" I decided that adult conversation was not going to take place around my son. "I drove him to the sitter's house earlier. She's prepared for him to spend the night," Tracy explained. "I see," I spoke in surprise. Advanced planning, to which I had not been privy, had taken place. "But I didn't see your cars parked out on the street." "We all wanted to surprise you, Brian, so we all parked a block away and walked. We couldn't take the chance that you'd just drive on by if you saw all our vehicles," Cassidy rejoined. Well, you all certainly caught me by surprise. What's the deal? Why are you all here? Has something changed recently that I don't know about? I inquired. Yes, it has, honey, Tracy began. Can we all go to the living room and explain? I'm prepared to answer your question now. Sure, but I need to visit the restroom first for a minute. I just got home. I'll be right there. Why don't you all go on ahead? I went to the restroom in the hall bathroom, peed, flushed, and washed my hands. I started my cell phone recording and slipped it into my shirt pocket where the camera lens was barely visible in case anything interesting happened, and joined the crowd in my living room. I was surprised to see two more people there who had not been in the kitchen before. I immediately recognized the asshole Tracy had cheated with seated next to a lovely woman slightly younger than him. Tracy started. Brian, you've met everyone here except for Elliot Franklin and his wife Gail. They're longtime members of our group of friends, but you've never met them before. I realize this might be a bit of a shock to you, but you were so adamant about knowing who he was. We all talked and agreed that this may be the best way for you to learn his name. If you try to attack him, all of the guys here have agreed to come between you two. We don't want anyone getting hurt here tonight. So you finally give me a name to the face, huh? It's a little late to be concerned about me being hurt, isn't it? I sarcastically stated. Oh, I get it. None of you were ever concerned for a moment about me being hurt, were you? Your only concern was to make sure that Wonder Boy here remained unharmed, wasn't it? Don't worry. I have no plans to touch the bastard. I don't wish to catch any of the diseases he may have already infected Tracy with when he fucked her. A groan of frustration was audible from everyone in attendance. Cassidy jumped in. Brian, we can appreciate your frustration, however. There's no need for anyone to use profane or salty language. Can we speak calmly and professionally as friends while this situation is being sorted out? We're trying to give you what you asked for. You wanted his name, and now you have it. We expected that you may also want to speak to him, which, as you can see, we've already arranged for you to do. However, Elliot doesn't need me to speak for him or on his behalf. He's quite capable of talking for himself. Our role tonight is merely to make introductions. After his introduction, Elliot rose to his feet and offered his hand. I'm afraid we've gotten off to an unfortunate start. I hope that by the end of this meeting, we can be friends or at least civil to one another. I promise to treat you with respect and courtesy at all times and trust you'll do the same, Brian. May I call you Brian? He asked as he offered his hand to me. I made no move to reciprocate his gesture, keeping my hands at my side. First of all, since we've just now met for the first time, Mr. Franklin, I prefer that you call me Mr. Wilson. I can't ever imagine us being friends warranting such familiarity. Secondly, you just promised to treat me with respect and courtesy after already disrespecting me in the most egregious manner, yet I'm expected to frivolously ignore your utter impertinence and treat you civilly in return? Fair enough, Mr. Wilson. My suggestion was solely concerning our present discourse. I was not referring to past indiscretions or incidences. If you will allow me, I'd like to speak with you about what happened between me and Tracy, your wife. Please do not speak her name in my presence, nor refer to her as my wife. That title may be short-lived and is distasteful to me. I'm assessing the pros and cons of divorce, which I'm sure you're already aware of. How then shall I refer to her, Mr. Wilson? You may call her the woman I married, a point which I will concede for the moment. Very well, Mr. Wilson, I would like to address what transpired between the woman you married and me. Hopefully, I can place the circumstances in a light you may eventually find palatable. I'm all ears, Mr. Franklin. Please enlighten me, I pandered. The arrogant man took a deep breath and began delivering his point of view. Look around this room, Mr. Wilson. What do you see? I'll tell you what you see. You see a room full of exceptionally attractive women and men, including the woman you married and yourself. Do you think that's by coincidence? Don't you find it striking that your best friends, the group you have enjoyed being with countless times, happens to be far more attractive than the average man or woman you meet? This group was inevitably drawn together like birds of a feather. As friendships grew, so did the intimacy and expressions of friendship. Every person in this room is in a happy, stable, and committed relationship. That is our first and foremost goal. Once everyone is secure in their relationship with their significant other, we realize that no force on earth could separate us from one another, and every one of us here believes the same of you and the woman you married. As I scanned the room, I noticed that all of the women were dressed provocatively, not sluttish, but each woman was dressed to highlight their assets to her best advantage. All of them wore big smiles as if they were silently flirting to entice me. He continued, "Take my wife, Gail, here. She's as gorgeous to me as any other woman in this room, and we plan to spend the rest of our lives together. No man in this room, including you, could ever take her away from me. And that knowledge provides me the security to be able to share her with others for our benefit, and the benefit of others in our group as well. In return, she is comfortable sharing me with these other lovely ladies. We both learn and grow beyond what we would otherwise be able to by remaining monogamous. That's an outdated and archaic term that no longer binds people together nearly as well as true love, consisting of trust, intimacy, understanding, sharing, and opening up horizons to great and wonderful things for our marriages. How nice for you and your wife, Mr. Franklin, and the rest of this group if they all freely have uninhibited sex with one another, but that has nothing whatsoever to do with me and the woman I married." "Excuse me, Mr. Wilson, but didn't you just admit that you have less trust, understanding, and security in your relationship with the woman you married than does every other couple in this room? Don't you see how wonderfully you two could benefit and expand your relationship by opening up to this?" And he spread his arms wide as if encompassing everyone else in the room. "If what you say is true, Mr. Franklin, then you just called every woman in the room, including the woman I married, a slut. I'm appalled that you somehow turned the head and morals of the woman I married so easily. I find your actions deplorable and reprehensible. A gentleman never inserts himself into a married relationship, as you admittedly have." "I see where your flawed logic is taking you, Mr. Wilson. Rest assured, this is not one-sided. You too are encouraged to embrace the concepts we here all hold dear. You could be with any woman in this room right now, if you had the desire to do so. When you and the woman you married became a part of our group, it was inevitable that you would be approached to participate with us inclusively in every way. The woman you married, solely due to her access to her co-workers day in and day out, had numerous conversations and approached the topic with trepidation owing to her concern over your potential response. It was only after exhaustive conversations with her on this subject that she consented to a one-time experience solely to find out if this was something that she honestly believed that the two of you could greatly benefit from. She was very apprehensive at first, but was soon convinced and realized that the experiences could improve your relationship. Had you not confronted her so harshly that night, she had planned to broach the subject with you and discuss the potential benefits she felt the experiences would yield. Mr. Wilson, the woman you married said that you rattled her with your accusatory confrontation before she had the opportunity to fully apprise you on what this is about. She panicked and retreated in defense, not knowing how to salvage her talk with you under the adversarial atmosphere you presented her. I'm sure you'll agree with everything we're offering as beneficial to you and the woman you married. All we have to do is find a way that will allow you to feel a little more comfortable with the idea." "I see," I said, as if I was seriously considering everything he'd said. Then I looked Tracy directly in the eyes and asked, "Is all this true? Did you discuss all of this with them without my knowledge, and then agree to test the waters with Mr. Franklin to see if you conceded it to be beneficial for us as husband and wife without even discussing it with me beforehand?" Tracy nervously nodded yes before explaining. "I had been told how wonderful it was to have these free associations and how much it improved and strengthened their marriages, and I wanted the same for us. As I participated in the experience with Elliot, I was evaluating the entire experience to learn how it could make things better for us, honey. Please believe that my love for you has never wavered, and I wanted only to show you what I'd learned from him to help convince you that participation would be beneficial for us both." She smiled sweetly as she finished, realizing that this was the first real conversation I'd allowed her to have with me since that night. "So you expect me to believe that just one miraculous session with Super Stud here has imparted to you the skills of a seasoned prostitute? That wasn't really your first time with him, was it?" She looked down at her feet, unable to make eye contact, confirming my suspicions. Mr. Franklin jumped back in. "Don't you see, Mr. Wilson? We have managed to help the woman who married you to understand the benefits. You would also be able to participate in every way as well. Plus, there are other advantages you may not have even yet considered," he added. "Please enlighten me about these advantages," I insisted. Well, Mr. Wilson, the woman you married will pick up some valuable pointers during her lovemaking sessions and would be able to bring those back to you when you are making love with her as well. I see. So you fancy yourself as some kind of Casanova, do you? Mr. Wilson, I'm a very experienced and considerate lover, and I am very good at taking less experienced lovers, such as the woman you married, under my tutelage. With my expertise, she will blossom and grow and learn and ensure that you receive the benefit of her new experiences as well. Her time with me and others will serve to broaden her horizons. Please don't become defensive as I explain this. Everyone goes through periods in our life when we become complacent and in a rut. Lovemaking can lose some of its luster. Without being disrespectful to you in any way, the woman you married mentioned that she would like the opportunity to try new things. I again looked Tracy directly in the eye. When did I ever resist any attempt at trying new things? If your perception was that we needed to spice things up, then why didn't you ever talk to me about it first before jumping into bed with a philanderer? She shyly replied, "Please don't take this wrong, honey. You're such a gentle and sweet lover, and that is what I need much of the time. But sometimes I want things to be more forceful and direct. That's what Elliot showed me. He was never trying to replace you in my heart in any way. He is your physical opposite and presented control and dominance that I ended up enjoying very much. It was all I could do to keep from lunging at the guy and trying to break his neck. If I'd ever entertained the notion that Tracy and I might be able to repair our relationship and work things out for the sake of my son, that was forever lost. Inside, a raging storm relentlessly pounded in my chest. On the outside, calm and tranquility was the face I presented. Now that I had arrived at the irreversible conclusion to divorce her, my new imperative was to collect as much ammunition as possible to fire back at all of them, creating as much chaos in their lives as possible for their involvement in the destruction of my happy home. To accomplish that, I needed to feign enough interest to give them a glimmer of hope that I was on the fence, considering what was on offer. I looked at each woman, undressing them with my eyes and not hiding my implied lust. Just so I'm clear, what you're saying, Mr. Franklin, is that I can have any woman here in this room if I wish, and use her for the fulfillment of my fantasies, that I have thus far withheld all of my married life simply because the woman I married wasn't up to the task? Tracy looked hurt at my assertion but said nothing, not wishing to inhibit my acquiescence. Exactly, Mr. Wilson. Any woman you wish. They all can be the woman of your dreams, and I know that only too well. I have created uninhibited sexual memories with each and every one of these ladies and speak from personal experience. You can even enjoy my wife Gail here if you so desire. She has been personally trained by me to satisfy the most ardent sexual appetite and will drain every ounce of energy from your body, leaving you in a puddle of orgasmic bliss." He enthused. I could sense the electricity in the room as they anticipated my sexual desires overtaking my logical mind. Normally, Tracy could make that happen quite easily, but not tonight. Before I make any decisions regarding such an opportunity, as you describe it, I'd first like to get a look at what each one has to offer me. I'd like to see every woman here in action, I suggested. He smirked, chuckled, and then replied, "I'm sure you think very highly of yourself, Mr. Wilson, but I don't believe you're physically prepared to sample every woman here tonight." "Of course not. I have met and am familiar with every couple here. What I'd like to see is everyone here do as you suggest and swap partners. I'm calling your bluff, Mr. Franklin. If everyone here will swap and have sex with someone other than their own wife right here and now in front of me, then it will show me what you say is true and simultaneously give me ample opportunity to select my very first rose from this beautiful garden to sample for myself. The woman I married and I will only be observers initially and will not participate. The only exception to my request is you and your lovely wife, Mr. Franklin. I'd like you and Gail to move to the master bedroom and demonstrate oral, vaginal, and anal sex, the likes of which I've never seen before. That will help me assess the level of skills which you claim to possess to be able to teach the woman I married new techniques I might appreciate." Mr. Franklin appeared genuinely surprised at my depraved suggestion. "And how shall it be determined who gets with who?" he inquired. I smiled the lustful grin of a perverted man. I began pairing all of them up with partners that I had never seen them with before to ensure that no one was with their wife/husband. I'd even considered pairing girl, boy, but decided not to push the envelope. It wouldn't have enhanced the outcome I had planned anyway. Mr. Franklin was stunned as he looked around the room. Well, everyone, this is our chance. We need to prove to Mr. Wilson that we're for real and allow him to check out the merchandise before sampling, he chuckled. Is everyone on board with this? They all shook their heads and began undressing. As 11 couples were staking out places in the living room to have sex, Tracy and I went upstairs to the master bedroom, followed by Elliot and Gail. Mr. Franklin, you and your wife please make yourselves at home. Tracy will sit over there, remaining fully dressed at all times, and watch you, Gail, in hopes of learning some new techniques to try on me later on. Now's the time to pull out all the stops and convince me of the sincerity of your words, Mr. and Mrs. Franklin. I'll be going back and forth between this bedroom and downstairs, so I can get an eyeful of every beauty here tonight. I hope you understand. I hope you know that you've made a most unusual request of us, Mr. Wilson, but I think I understand. I trust that you will thoroughly enjoy the fantastic scenery to which you will be exposed. And the bonus is that all of us here will get to do the very thing we love most, sharing, caring, and loving on each other. With that, I left them to their task, which was to impress me with their sexual prowess. Tracy said nothing. She took her seat and followed my instructions implicitly to watch all the action before her with interest. I closed the bedroom door as I left to view how things were proceeding downstairs. I was fascinated to see that about half of the group was making out for arousal, and the other half were already engaged in oral or vaginal intercourse. The couch held 4 couples, one bent over each end's armrest and the other 2 seated and making out. The love seat and chair in the living room were also occupied by 3 couples. The 4 remaining couples had already staked their claims to sections of the floor and were precipitously engaged in sex. I walked around the room surveying the bodies of the naked women as if I were stalking prey. I made sure my phone camera caught all the action. Their surprising lack of inhibitions informed me that this kind of activity had been going on for quite some time. I no longer believed that the pictures I had of Tracy with the asshole were of their first encounter. No matter the number of her betrayals was immaterial. We would invariably become divorced. I trudged my way back upstairs pre-announcing my arrival and gave a quick knock on the door before entering. I wanted the 3 of them to think it was a sign of respect, however. My purpose in doing so was much more nefarious. I acted keenly interested in their very physical sexual encounter. The asshole was grunting and Gail was crying out in throes of passion as he heartily pounded away in her asshole. It had never occurred to me that a woman could receive so much pleasure from anal intercourse. Tracy had never shown such interest in me the few times we had tried it over the years. I walked all around the bed smiling for all I was worth. Even though the man himself disgusted me, watching such an animalistic encounter put on solely for my benefit induced a noticeable tint in my pants. As I left, I closed the door again behind me and made my way through the writhing bodies, eagerly demonstrating the heights of sexual exploration. Anything and everything I could imagine was taking place before my eyes. Again, I snaked my way around, trying to avoid stepping on anyone. Most of the bouncing breasts I surveyed were clearly fake, which is a turnoff for me. But the 4 women with real ones captivated my attention. I was mesmerized as they moved like water bags sloshing back and forth, undulating with the exuberant thrusts they were receiving. It was obvious to everyone why I spent much more time downstairs than in the bedroom. The men quickly caught on and made certain that my prurient interests were thoroughly indulged. There wasn't a limp dick in the room. These men were unreservedly enjoying themselves with another man's wife as if it were an everyday occurrence. Perhaps it was. All I knew was that I'd never be a part of this, regardless of how aroused I became. I was tempted to fish my cock out and jerk off on one of the girls, but that would be too compromising for me. I elected to maintain my decorum. One final trip upstairs, again ensuring I was heard long before seen, revealed the asshole plunging his cock down Gail's throat as she readily devoured his full length, which I deemed to be slightly longer than average. As I entered the room, the asshole loudly growled and moaned as he emptied the contents of his balls deep into Gail's throat. There's no way she would have ever tasted his seed at that depth. Impressive, I pretended. You two seem to know each other quite well. We ought to, considering how long we've been married, crooned the arrogant asshole. Oh, how long is that? I baited. 12 years next month, he bragged. Click, I thought, another bullet loaded into the magazine. Congratulations, it's quite clear to me that you love Gail here more than any other woman, I prodded. Absolutely, he added for emphasis. No other woman on earth even comes close. Gail is my everything. I can't imagine life without her, just as I hope you could never imagine a life without the woman you married. He grinned as he looked over at a smiling Tracy, who beamed at his suggestion. She too hoped that they had been successful at changing my mind. I quite enjoyed the performances downstairs. 3 girls in particular especially captured my interest. It will be quite the challenge to decide which flower I will choose to pick first, I inferred. Why pick just one? I'm sure it could easily be arranged for you to have all 3 at once when you agree to completely join our group, Mr. Wilson. 3 gorgeous women at once? One of my longtime fantasies has been 2 women at once. I never even dared to consider the possibility of 3. You certainly know how to twist a man's arm, Mr. Franklin. I hope those girls will be twisting more than your arm very soon, Mr. Wilson, he added. Everyone downstairs is getting dressed now, I believe. Why don't you two join Tracy and me when you're ready? Tracy? And I extended my hand to her to give the appearance of an olive branch. I made a mental note to thoroughly wash that hand later. It disgusted me to touch her. 10 minutes later, everyone was together again and fully dressed, though not as sharply as before. Tracy and I stood facing the group who were well satisfied with themselves and my more cooperative attitude. Well, Mr. Wilson, or may I call you Brian now? Asshole asked. Brian's fine, I relented to gain their confidence. Thank you, Brian. Have you come to see our group in a better light now? Will you and Tracy please join us at this new level of intimacy? You'll never regret it. Your marriage will only grow stronger as a result, guaranteed. Are you prepared to enjoy yourself with 3 of these lovelies tonight? Or would you prefer to set it up for another night? As much as it pains me to say so literally, I chuckled, I'd like just a bit more time to digest everything that has been explained to me tonight. Tracy and I need to have some one-on-one discussions that are private just between the 2 of us. Once we've worked some things out, then we'll get back to you with our answer. Is that acceptable? The asshole gave an obvious wan smile. He was having a difficult time faking politeness. He had not anticipated a delay. He wanted my answer right now, but he wasn't going to get it. Of course, he said obsequiously. Take as much time as you need. Then he nodded. Gentlemen. 3 of the burliest men quickly grabbed and held me steadfast. I wasn't going anywhere. Though I was being securely restrained, I didn't sense any threat of violence. It was just a surprise move. Tracy then walked up, removed my cell phone from my shirt pocket, and started clicking on all captured videos. Please understand, Brian, we want to trust you. Really, we do. But until you're fully one of us, we must understandably take measures to protect ourselves. It was patently obvious that you recorded the proceedings of this evening's events on your cell phone. I'm afraid we can't afford that level of trust in you at the moment. Tracy nodded at the asshole. He asked her, It's gone then, all of it? Tracy nodded as she said, Yes, there are no recordings of tonight's activities. Then she replaced the phone in my pocket. It was then crystal clear that she was already a full-fledged member for him to trust that she would go against my wishes to fulfill theirs. I exhibited the look of defeat that the asshole had sought. Mr. Franklin continued, There now, Brian. Don't be so down. I want to believe that you chose to keep a recording primarily so that you could better select who you'd be with first when you join our group at the top level. But please understand that we simply can't take that chance. There's too much at stake. But I'm sure you saw enough of these beauties tonight to make that decision without the benefit of a recording. Each girl here can leave an indelible impression on your body given the chance. Let us know something as soon as you can, all right? He patted me on the back and the group quietly left the house without fanfare. A few of the ladies flirted and looked at me seductively as they left, forming their hand into a symbolic phone to their ear and silently mouthed, Call me. After the last one disappeared out the door, I grabbed my keys and headed toward the garage myself. Where are you going? Tracy asked in puzzlement. To pick up Bobby, if that's okay, I shot back. I was hoping we could, get reacquainted physically tonight. Watching them have sex in front of me on our bed revved my motor, and nothing could hide that tent you carried around in your pants. Why don't we do something to help us both out before picking him up? Besides, she's expecting him to spend the night. There's no reason to go get him right now, is there? She said coyly as she twirled her hair, licked her lips, and strutted provocatively before me. I miss my son. Evidently you do not. I'll be back after a while, I advised. She thrust her hands on her hips in frustration, but I ignored her and proceeded out the door. I drove to the Angus Steakhouse restaurant. I was starving, having had no supper yet, and was missing what I had ordered but not eaten the last time I was there. They did not disappoint. I took my time and enjoyed the tender beef as I replayed tonight's events in my mind. Hopefully, everything would work out as I had intended. Only time would tell. Kind Mrs. Stevenson profusely thanked me for the generous tip I paid her above her usual hourly fee. I might need to depend on her in the near future and wanted to ingratiate myself with her apart from Tracy. Bobby was thrilled to see Daddy, and I kept him cackling all the way home. I gave him his bath and fed him right before putting him down for the night. Tracy informed me that she was preparing something light for us since we had not eaten. I informed her that I'd already grabbed a bite to eat and she should just look after herself and not worry about me. Disturbed at my pettiness, she steered clear of me, not wishing to upset Bobby with our upcoming discussion. Since it was Monday night and we both were working tomorrow, I prepared for bed myself. She wanted to talk. "What's going on, Brian? You seem very interested in Elliot's proposal about our group, and both of us were horny after everything that played out before us. Then you dropped me like a hot potato. What gives?" "I'm so glad you asked. Let me answer your question with some questions of my own. Perhaps your responses will provide you clarity," I suggested. "Go ahead," she volunteered. "Right before they left, 3 men grabbed me in my own home and you never said a word against it. Is that correct?" "It wasn't like that," she countered. "It wasn't, huh? Did 3 men grab and restrain me in my own home? Yes or no, Tracy, did that happen?" "Yes, but—" Before she could retort, I interrupted. "Yes, they did. And did you say a single word of protest to any of the other witnesses who also remained silent? Yes or no, Tracy? Just answer yes or no," I commanded. "No," she replied sheepishly. "Finally, we're getting somewhere. Now then, listen to this next question very carefully. Did I ask you to remove my cell phone and delete anything off of it? Did I? Yes or no, Tracy? Come on, girl. You were doing so well. Don't stop now. Be honest," I fumed. "No," she quietly stated. "Now then, please bear with me because this is going to be a long question. Pay close attention so I don't have to repeat myself. You admit you offered no objection whatsoever to my being restrained in my own home. You admit also that you removed my cell phone and deleted recordings off of it, not at my request, but at the request of someone other than your husband. Is that correct, Tracy? Yes or no, is that true?" "Yes." "Good girl, we're almost there. Now then, since I was standing right there in the room when it happened, and I didn't hear anyone say to you or ask you to delete anything off my personal cell phone, then you must have previously engaged in conversation in my absence, whereupon you agreed to perform that task without my prior knowledge or consent. Is that correct?" Tracy looked down at her feet. "Yes, that's correct. I didn't think of it like that. You make it seem like an act of betrayal on my part." "It is a betrayal, Tracy. Now let's revisit your first 2 questions. Why did I drop you like a hot potato? What gives? Your own answers should reveal the truth of why I am acting this way. You proved tonight that you're on their side, not mine, not ours, theirs. Now, if you have no objection, I'm going to go to bed alone tonight. Again, I don't want to look at or be around someone who stabs me in the back so indifferently." Tracy began sobbing as I left her in the hallway to consider her behavior. Of course, I locked my door. Somewhere around 4 a.m. I heard the doorknob being tried. 3 or 4 fruitless twists were sufficient to foil her attempt. Tuesday morning, I spoke with the vice president in charge of the facility where I worked. "Dan, can you give me a recommendation for a divorce attorney? I mean a good one who will fight just as hard for a husband as they would for a wife?" "Please tell me you're not asking for yourself, Brian," Dan pleaded. "Unfortunately, that's the case, I'm afraid. I figured a man of your position would be in the know on such matters. You seem to know everything else," I chuckled. "I'm good friends with Ted Russ. He's our contact with the firm that handles all of our legal matters. I'm certain he would be able to provide the name of someone good. Let me give him a quick call and get right back to you." "Thanks, Dan, and—" "No need to say it, Brian. This stays just between us. I respect another man's privacy." "You don't know how refreshing that is to hear. Thanks, Dan." I called the office of B. Thorenson at Ted's recommendation and scheduled an appointment at 2:30 that afternoon. Turns out it wasn't the letter B, it was B, as in Beatrice. She informed me that her cases were 70% women and 30% men, but once she agreed to take a case, she was all in and fought hard for her client regardless of formidable circumstances. It didn't take long to convince her of the validity of my position as the wronged party, and she was only too happy to take me on. She did advise me that I'd be on the hook for child support for 15 years, until Bobby passed his 18th birthday. Then again, college expenses are usually factored into these things for the benefit of the child. I explained that I had no problem whatsoever providing for my son, but I was hoping for at least 50-50 shared custody, either on an every other week or bi-monthly schedule. She couldn't make promises but would fight hard to get me those terms. As to alimony, she spelled out that I'd most likely be on the hook for 3 to 5 years, depending on the particular judge we drew. Owing to the disparity of income, the general outcome in this state was 1 year of alimony for every 2 years of marriage up to 20 years of marriage. Then it was capped at 10 years. Although I'd have to live with that, it galled me to think that I'd be paying her to have sex with that group of slimeball swingers. Expecting our family to grow, Tracy and I had been renting the house where we lived for the past 4 years and had been diligently researching house plans and available lots to build our dream house upon. I had accumulated quite a few sketches of features that were to be engineered into our special retreat. All of those dreams now were nothing more than a puff of smoke. At least there was no house to sell, split or fight over. Bobby wouldn't be attached to any particular dwelling at his tender age, so if Tracy continued renting the house, it would be of no consequence to me. I knew that I'd never sleep in the master bedroom ever again, knowing that it had been contaminated by that asshole. Who knows how many times he'd already christened that bed with her before I discovered her cheating. B explained that the average amount of time it took to get a divorce in our state was 8 months uncontested and a year if contested. I was sure hoping to become one of the 8-month statistics. Being yoked to a backstabbing slut held little appeal to me now that my decision to divorce Tracy was clear. B explained also that there was no financial advantage to filing claiming infidelity. However, she advised that the claim might become useful if custody became contentious. She stated that she could have the papers ready to be served as early as Thursday afternoon. I asked her to have Tracy served at work Friday at 10 a.m., where many of her friends and coworkers could witness the event. After the divorce issues were addressed and her fee agreed upon, I asked her about potential living arrangements until the divorce was finalized. What sort of questions do you have, Brian? Well, my only concern is time spent with my son. In this early formative period of his life, 8 months to a year can seem like an eternity both to him and to me. I have no desire to be an absent father to him any more than necessary. Would it be illegal or inappropriate for me to continue living in the same house with her to maximize time spent with him? Although it's not unheard of, Brian, it can be quite the challenge. How so? First of all, once she has served divorce papers on Friday, she is going to be extremely upset with you. If you're in the general vicinity where she is likely to rain down fire and brimstone on your head. Are you prepared to face a woman's wrath? Absolutely. I can easily compartmentalize my emotions once she is served, because in my mind we would be legally separated and I could treat her indifferently, much as she has been treating me lately. And that brings me to my next point, Brian. She may very well not want a divorce. Very often cheating wives want to have their cake and eat it too. Letting you go may not be an option for her, and she may pull out all the stops to prevent it. But this is a legal process, right? She can't subvert the law to her will simply because she wants it that way. You're right, of course, but she could throw a monkey wrench into the whole works, be informed. How so? If you two were to have conjugal relations at any point before the divorce is granted, then the time period is reset and the clock starts ticking from a new beginning, and you'll have to wait another 8 months, she provided. The state will view your conjugal relations as your desire to stop the divorce proceedings. That would never be a problem for me, although I could easily see Tracy endeavoring to tempt me into her bed to subvert the proceedings. I have an iron will, B. I will not succumb, I stated emphatically. You don't have to, she insisted. All Tracy has to do is claim you two had sex, And unless you can prove otherwise, which would be nearly impossible to do, then the clock would be reset whether you were conjugal or not. A judge would have a difficult time believing your claim of never being with her intimately while still living together under the same roof. I've seen this happen before. Brian and I strongly advise against it. I countered, let me ask you this. If she does make such a claim, would she be required to give specific details such as time and place, etc.? I don't mean intimate details of the hypothetical session itself, but dates and times that I could potentially refute. Yes, she does, but again, it would be your word against hers, and the judge is likely to believe her, especially if she is tearfully convincing. Leave that to me. Thank you, B. You've been most helpful. I then spoke with her about handling another legal matter for me to take place immediately after the divorce. Tracy usually gets home a half hour before I do, so it was no surprise to find her preparing supper in the kitchen. Contrary to my normal form, I avoided the kitchen and went directly upstairs to get my shower. Since I now use the hall bath, there are fewer opportunities for her to intimately trap me. I had taken my change of clothes into the bathroom with me. It was time for me to begin practicing living separate lives under the same roof. When I came out of the bathroom fully dressed, she was waiting for me in the hall. Supper will be ready in a few minutes. Bobby's already in his high chair in the kitchen. You smell nice and fresh, she said flirtingly. I'll be right down, thank you, I replied as I ignored her remark and unlocked my spare bedroom door. The tension was palpable, but she said nothing acrimonious. While we were eating, she began, I'd like to explain about the cell phone deal last night. Knock yourself out, I said calmly. While you were downstairs evaluating potential partners and the three of us were upstairs alone, Elliot informed me that he knew you were recording the events of that evening and that it wouldn't be fair to allow everyone to be exposed to the professional risk you could subject the group to with video. After you confronted me with pictures of him and me together, it greatly concerned him. The right thing to do was eliminate the threat. The way you were moving your chest around to aim the camera was obvious. He said they couldn't leave there that night until that threat had been neutralized. Not knowing if you had a password on the phone, they were prepared to take it with them and return it later after it had been cleaned. Elliot suggested that I could prevent all of that if I would delete the recordings myself in front of you. I see. And why in the world would they believe you would do such a thing to your husband? Because I gave them my word, Brian. I don't understand. Understand what? Well, didn't you give me your word to remain true to me the day we were married? There was significant silence following my remark. I was glad about it. Honey, I don't want you to think of me being on their side. It's not like that at all. It's not? What if the circumstances had been reversed? What if those three men had grabbed you in our home? Do you think I would have just stood by quietly and allowed it? What other choice would you have had, Brian? The three of them could easily have taken you, silly. That's true, but that knowledge wouldn't have stopped me. Hell, it wouldn't have even slowed me down. I might have been beaten down, but not until after inflicting a lot of damage myself. I would have fought for you because I would be on your side, not theirs. We used to be a team, you and I. Last night, you weren't acting as my wife. You were acting as one of them. I'm sorry you don't see it my way, Brian. I explained about the cell phone. I don't know what else to say. There's nothing else to say, is there? I bantered. About that subject, you're right. How did you come by those pictures, Brian? I'd like to know. I'm sure you would. Wouldn't it be interesting if one of your friends was not as committed to your cause as the others in your group? What if one of your own coworkers outed you to me and delivered those pictures to my office? How would you feel about that? Who? Please tell me. Which one, male or female? She urgently inquired. I can't say, Tracy. Why? I gave my word, I said with a big grin. She could see that she was getting nowhere with her line of questioning, so she decided to pursue another topic with me. Did you enjoy watching all the lovemaking going on last night? Wasn't it exciting? I'm not into group sex. All I saw was a bunch of people rutting like animals. My body may have physically responded to the visual stimulus, but emotionally, it was flat. Exactly, Brian. It's not meant to be emotional for any of them. All of the emotions and love are reserved for their husbands and wives. What you witnessed was just pure raw sex, nothing more. And because it's confined to our familiar group, it's clean and safe, with no worry about disease. We could share in that with all of them, honey. We've been invited to join them. It's a wonderful opportunity, don't you see? We can grow closer together and learn to please each other in ways never imagined before. It will enhance our marriage. How's it working so far? Our marriage is hanging by a thread. I feel closer to you already, I sarcastically added. Don't be like that. You haven't even tried it yet. You don't know what it's like. Go ahead, try one of the girls out, even three at once, as Elliot suggested if you want to. I won't mind. Heck, I'll even watch if you'd like. Tracy, has our sex life been so boring, mundane, and unimaginative that you fear we won't survive as a couple without inviting other people into our bedroom? I didn't say that. It's not that we wouldn't survive without it. But don't you want to do more than merely survive? Shouldn't we take advantage of opportunities to enhance our marriage when they present themselves? What would be the harm in that? The harm, as I see it, is destroying the trust we once had. That's what you've already done by your experimentation. Instead of enhancing our marriage, it is ripping the very fabric of it in two. Perhaps no one else you know views fidelity as an admirable character trait, but I do. Obviously, your friends place no value on it. They proved that last night. I no longer trust you, Tracy. Since seeing those 3 pictures of you with that asshole, I constantly wonder who you might be fucking or sucking today. You've proven that you're quite capable of doing whatever you want behind my back. If this is so important to you, and you believe in it so much, why didn't you come to me and talk it over with me first, before jumping into bed with another man? Because this is how I knew you would react. I thought that if I could participate and realize the benefit of it first, then I could bring home everything I'd learned to you, and we would be the better for it. Once you saw the improvement in me and my attitudes towards sex, I figured you would recognize the value of it and agree wholeheartedly. So, basically, you and that smug asshole deem yourselves to come from a superior position of enlightenment and understanding, believing that low-lifers like me need to be spoon-fed to slowly glean life's truths you two somehow instinctively grasp? How elitist of you to charitably allow your superior knowledge to trickle down to this lowly peasant. I had no idea how lucky I was. Sarcasm was now dripping from my every word, and she picked up on it. Undaunted, she countered, "Why don't you let me show you what I've learned? I picked up some techniques from my time with Elliot, and I closely watched Gail with him last night, as you asked. The whole purpose of this process is to enhance our love life, not ruin it. Let me show you what I can do right now. I swear you won't regret it," she enthused. "Every time I look at you, I see your mouth sucking his prick. That's not conducive to making me want to kiss you anytime soon. If you were to spread your legs for me, I'd see his prick in there also, and his semen running from your diseased cunt. All you would be offering me is a contaminated slut who freely shares with other men what used to be solely mine." "Solely yours? You don't own me, Brian. You never have and you never will," she said defiantly. "You're absolutely right. I never claimed to own you. I falsely believed you were mine because you said you gave yourself to me. Now you've taken that back and given it to another man. You've broken something in me, Tracy, and I'm not sure it can ever be fixed." She began sobbing again. Needless to say, that was the last conversation she initiated until Friday. I spent all of my available time with Bobby. I didn't hesitate to change his poopy diaper and never asked her to help me with him in any way. We almost made a game of it to see who winded up giving him his bath. Bobby seemed to relish the constant attention, and I was happier for it as well. For several days, I researched the names, Elliot and Gail Franklin. I was hoping to find their connection to the group. I came up nearly empty-handed. I did find one Elliot Franklin in my public records search, a homeless man who had been arrested for harassing people for money downtown as a panhandler. The picture and age weren't even close to the man who fucked Tracy. I would try to find out more about them. I chose to have Tracy served at 10 a.m. Friday because I was attending a local chapter meeting of facility managers. We typically meet every quarter for 2 to 4 hours, which includes lunch. Numerous contractors sponsor the event to make their pitch for their services at the various facilities represented by the membership. That way, not if, but when Tracy called, my secretary would confirm my prolonged absence, and I would intentionally leave my cell phone on silent. The only call I would respond to would be an emergency requiring my attention at work. I wasn't avoiding Tracy altogether. I simply wanted to give her time to overcome the initial shock before speaking to her. When I eventually returned to work, I returned her call from the many messages she had left me. I could hear her quickly walking out of the earshot of others as she began talking to me. It's about damn time. Are you serious? Having me served in front of my friends? Do you know how embarrassing that was for me? Are you really going to divorce me over this? I told you it was nothing, Brian. When are you going to get that through your thick skull? Why haven't you answered your phone? Why do you refuse to talk to me about this? My secretary should have informed you that I was in a facility manager's meeting. I just now returned to the office and immediately returned your call. I do have a job to perform, you know. It doesn't stop simply because you want to talk. And as far as talking goes, when have I refused to talk to you? You're the one who has been avoiding talking to me the last 2 days. I never once refused conversation. I'm talking to you now, am I not? But as we both have jobs to do, why don't we resume this conversation at a more appropriate time after work? I'll talk to you then about anything you wish. She started crying over the phone. I don't want a divorce, she wailed. Please, Brian, don't divorce me. Tonight, we'll talk tonight, all right, Tracy? All right, she said, sniffling. I love you. Tonight then. Goodbye, Tracy. I only had one meeting left at work that day, and it was a brief one concerning a lab that was experiencing problems. I called our building automation contractor to resolve the issue. Surrounding yourself with quality people makes work much simpler. I knocked off an hour early as Friday afternoons are typically less problematic. Most people don't want to deal with problems Friday afternoons. However, I realized I was going to have to deal with this one, and the best way was to buckle down and meet it head-on. Realizing that she may not be in a cooking mood this evening, I picked up Chick-fil-A for supper and texted her that I had done so. She arrived shortly after I did. I grabbed his diaper bag and brought Bobby into the house from her car. She lunged at me, hugging me as I held our boy in my arms, knowing I would not sharply rebuke her and upset Bobby. I put him in his high chair and helped feed him. Toddlers certainly can be messy eaters. He's at the stage where he likes to toss his food, so very little gets left on his tray in front of him to throw. She thanked me for the takeout. We both cooed and talked with Bobby happily, though some tears leaked from her eyes while doing so. I spent most of the evening with him, never straying far from his side until he was once again put down for the night. He was my focus, my purpose, my reason for enduring arduous circumstances. I knew what was coming and was as prepared as I could be. She was looking over the divorce paperwork as I entered the living room where she was. She took a deep breath to calm herself before speaking. I'm sorry, Brian, okay? Is that what you wanted to hear? To be honest, it's the first apology you've offered me since this all came out. What exactly is it that you're sorry for, Tracy? I'm sorry that you saw those pictures and found out the way you did. I can only imagine how unsettling that must have been for you. I see. You're sorry that I found out, but not sorry that you cheated on me. Got it. Don't put it like that. Elliot said that once you realized the benefit of our association, you would come around and embrace our group at the intimate level because of the freedom you'd be afforded to be with other women, just as I would be with other men. Naturally, he would say that. It appears that you and Elliot both suffer from the same mistake of not checking with me first about such matters as infidelity. It's a shame that you put more faith in his word about my character than you do mine. Contrary to popular belief, Elliot is not the repository of information about me or our marriage. He may be an expert at many things, but he's an abysmal failure when it comes to knowing me, just as you appear to be. Look, honey, I realize now that I went about this all wrong. You're right. I should have come to you first about this before entering into it without your knowledge. After seeing your reaction the other night, Elliot told me that in hindsight, had I approached you first, the end result would have gone much smoother. He's still convinced that you'll come around, but now I'm not so sure. Will you please call off the silly divorce and let us get back on track? Back on track? Tracy, that train has derailed and caused irreparable damage. There is no track to put it back on. You blew that up with dynamite when you allowed that asshole to bed you, and then betrayed me again on top of that. Just sign the papers and let us both pick up what's left of the pieces of our lives and move forward on separate paths. I know you, Brian. You don't want Bobby to come from a broken home being raised by two parents who live in different houses. If I were to remarry, you wouldn't want him to call another man daddy. No man wants that for his son. Think about that. Reconciliation is the best possible option for both of us. I'd hate for him to call another woman mother should you remarry after a divorce, same as you. Perhaps so. You should have thought about all those things before you betrayed your vows, not after. You're right. It would kill me to hear him call another man daddy. But better to come from a broken home than to live in a home full of lies, deceit, and debauchery. If we didn't divorce, I'd still never participate in your group of sluts and whores. They might be physically attractive, but to me they're disgusting. And you'd go on fucking whoever you felt like that night. But it would never be me. I could never be intimate with you again, Tracy. Put that in your pipe and smoke it. You don't mean that. You're just saying that to hurt me, and it does hurt. So score 1 for Brian. Look, what if I gave up on the idea completely? Swore that I would never participate in anything with them ever again? What if I turned my back on them as friends? I'm desperate, honey. You and Bobby are the 2 best things that ever happened to me in my entire life. I'm sorry that you believe I've turned my back on us, but it's not true. I value the 2 of you above everything and everyone else. I hear the words coming out of your mouth, Tracy, but I just don't believe you. You've already proven yourself to be a liar. I can't trust anything you say now. It's too little too late. Just sign the papers and get this over with as quickly as possible. Never. I'll never sign those damn papers as long as I live. I don't want a divorce, and I'm going to fight you every step of the way, no matter how long it takes. I may have lost you for the moment, Brian, but I aim to win you back. I'm not giving up on us. I have more faith in us than you do. I'll crawl on my hands and knees to you until you take me back. It's a shame you didn't have enough faith in us to remain faithful to your wedding vows. You've heard the old aphorism, once a cheater, always a cheater. And that's the lens through which I will always view you, I stabbed. She began sobbing again, perhaps at the realization that she faced an impossible task. What now? She asked. I hope you're not expecting me to leave. I'm not going anywhere. I'm staying right here with Bobby. Besides, neither of us has anywhere else to go, she spouted. You're right about that. With you out of the picture now for me, Bobby has become my whole world. I don't want to spend any more time away from him than necessary, so I've decided to continue living right here as the divorce proceeds. She jumped up and down, clapping her hands together in excitement. I continued, Don't worry, I'll stay out of your way. I will no longer expect you to do my laundry, prepare my meals, or pick up after me. You take care of your needs, I'll take care of mine, and we'll both tend to Bobby's. All I ask is that you avoid touching me with your contaminated body. To me, you are a walking disease from head to toe, repulsive to look at, disgusting to think about, and impossible to remain married to. We'll both coexist under the same roof, but that's all it will ever be, coexistence until divorce that will never lead to reconciliation. Her ebullience soon evolved into dejection as she considered what I'd just stated. I heard what you said, Brian, but divorce is a long way down the road, and we both know a lot of things can happen in a long time. I'm going to win you back, honey. I swear I will. As long as you continue seeing and talking to your so-called friends, there's not a snowball's chance in hell. I will never be around them again. As you so aptly pointed out, I don't own you, and I have no control over your behavior. But if you ever bring one of your dipshit fuckwad asshole lovers here to this house, I swear on my life that you and he will seriously come to regret it. Is that clear? Of course, honey. I already told you that I'd turn my back on them if that's what it took to win you back. Do you want me to quit my job and become a full-time stay-at-home mom? No, it's too late for that now. Besides, if you did, it would only cost me more in alimony in the divorce. She didn't like my comeback but maintained a cheerful smile for my benefit. I had decided that our days of being confrontational were behind us. There was nothing she could now say that would induce me to lose my cool and berate her again. Both of us had suffered enough from insults and innuendo. I could be a professional both at work and at home. I elected to view it as a temporary business arrangement. Nothing was going to be allowed to interfere with my time with my son. For a couple of weeks, we had curt, polite conversation, saying only what was necessary. We did surprisingly agree to a few suggestions my attorney B had proposed. In the interim, I would pay all of the rent if Tracy would pay all of the utilities. I had all of the utilities canceled in our joint names and reissued in her name alone. Both of our cars were already paid off, so we each took care of our own gas and insurance costs. We each took care of our own food, so there was no sharing required for groceries. Extricating myself financially from her wasn't as challenging as I had anticipated. Since I was still paying the lion's share of our expenses, she was amenable. I moved half of our savings to a new account in my name alone and left the remaining balance in the account in her name alone. She became pretty nasty to me for a few days after that, but soon realized that I was only executing what had been spelled out in my terms for the divorce agreement, which she still politely refused to sign. Once all of my moves had been executed, she decided to execute some moves of her own. She began dressing more and more provocatively around me. She'd wear conservative clothing to work, but after her evening shower, she invariably appeared in skimpy and sometimes translucent clothing. I ignored her exhibitionism, maintaining my professional demeanor. As she became more frustrated, she'd shed more and more clothing until she eventually paraded around the house nude. She made sure that all of her assets shook to their best advantage in my presence. Bobby didn't care a bit if Mommy was dressed or nude. Tracy made every effort to think of reasons to ask me questions and engage me in conversation. I was always polite and never refused her unless she became personal. I never asked anything of her nor initiated any conversations. My lack of response induced her to step up her game. For example, long after Bobby had gone to sleep, she would leave her bedroom door wide open and loudly masturbate, making sure I heard every groan of her demonstrative passion. I chuckled to myself every time she performed for me, picturing in my mind that her lover was fucking her. I never experienced arousal under those circumstances. That's not to say that I didn't have my own needs. I usually took care of them while in the shower behind a locked door. One day, I was rummaging through a drawer in my room looking for a particular color of socks when it occurred to me that I had not seen the 3 photographs I had of their tryst. I urgently searched through every drawer in case I had moved them and forgotten about it. They were gone, and I knew who had taken them. I carefully examined the lock on my door with a magnifying glass, and it was then that I noticed the fine scratches. She would never have been able to pick the lock herself. She must have called a locksmith to do it for her and make her a key. It was the only explanation. I purchased 2 new identical lock sets the next day and installed them on my bedroom and bathroom doors, again pocketing the only new keys. She wouldn't want me to know that she could get into my room any time she wished, and I didn't want her to know she no longer had access until she tried it again. Her continuing betrayal to protect her lover reaffirmed that my decision to divorce was the correct one. Now I wondered if she would lie and claim that her tryst with Elliot never even took place. After a few months of détente, she began periodically asking me to take her out to eat or to a movie, anything resembling a date or couples activity. I always politely declined such offers. I could tell she was getting antsy. She was accustomed to going out several times a month with her friends. She ached to be with them again, but remembered her declaration not to interact with them. Then I started getting calls and texts from them, inviting us out, or even me alone if I so desired. After each such call or text, I blocked the number without responding to prevent a reoccurrence. Mid-December, she invited me to attend her company's Christmas party. I politely declined, stating that I'd promised to babysit a small boy but told her to thoroughly enjoy herself. We had always attended together in the past. I'm wondering now if she was sad solely because the swingers only accepted happy couples into their close-knit club, which we certainly weren't. The following weekend was my company's party. I had planned on going alone, but she would have none of it. She took Bobby to the sitter's home earlier that evening. I deftly left for the party without saying a word to her. Apparently, she followed soon after in her car and quickly found me at the party. As usual, she was breathtakingly beautiful. She endeavored to encourage small talk with me in front of others, but I interacted minimally. When I was alone with him, VP Dan asked if we had reconciled. I explained the situation and he just laughed, saying I had guts to live under such conditions. I made it clear, though, that I didn't want to lose any time with my son for the duration. He understood my plight. Upon leaving the party, I went directly to the sitter's home and picked up Bobby. He slept all the way home. I expected Tracy to be bitterly disappointed after the party and rake me over the coals, but she was so pleased just to be out with me under any pretense that she seemed grateful for what few scraps of attention she was inadvertently afforded in a public setting. Tracy regularly stripped completely nude every time she entered the house and remained naked until she turned in for the night. She invariably paraded sexily in front of me if I was watching TV or reading the news on my cell phone. I put my engineering skills to work and soldered in a resistor parallel to the thermistor built into our digital thermostat for temperature control. The resistance value I selected caused the heating set point to be 5 degrees lower than the temperature displayed, making the house cooler than normal. My idea was to induce her to wear warm clothing. I was partially successful. She began wearing sheer nude stockings attached to a very skimpy nude garter belt. Added to that were see-through panties and bra, which apparently added sufficient warmth for her to continue nearly nude in my presence. After 2 weeks, I removed the fixed value resistor, restoring normal, accurate operation. At least I had tried. 5 months after she had been served, she informed me that she was going out to eat with Cassidy, her best friend, on Saturday nights if I was okay to watch Bobby. I nonchalantly responded that I was fine with it as long as she didn't bring the slut nor any of her lovers here to the house. There was a bowling league sponsored by my employer, which I chose to join on the Saturday nights she went out. I had a blast making an utter fool of myself on the lanes, and Bobby was thrilled to receive so much attention from the ladies who attended. It was much better than sitting at home wondering what Tracy must be doing or who she must be doing. One time I arrived home after she did and she inquired where I'd been with Bobby. I told the truth. She asked if she could go with me the next time. And again, I told her truthfully that I only go out when she does, rather than sit home alone. My response immensely frustrated her. But then again, pleasing Tracy was no longer my concern. She often asked me, how can we get back to being a loving couple if I never gave her the chance? She never signed the divorce papers. It was going to take the full year. 6 months after service, B. Thorenson, my attorney, contacted me informing me that Tracy's attorney had successfully argued for 10 mandatory marriage counseling sessions, 2 per week. I was required to attend and could not simply sit there saying nothing the entire session. I would be required to respond to every question asked of me by the counselor. I asked her if I could repeat the same simple short sentence to each question. B said she didn't care what I said as long as I said something that was pertinent to our marriage. I thanked her and hung up. Of course, Tracy's attorney arranged for the marriage counselor to be one who heavily favored the wife and readily vilified the husband. I was unconcerned about what the therapist thought of me as long as I complied with the letter of the law. I responded to every question and statement from both Tracy and the therapist by saying, I do not wish to remain married to a promiscuous woman. It didn't take long for them both to become frustrated and angry with me, but although my repetitive remark may have been succinct, it also pertained to our marriage. I withstood the barrage of verbal abuse heaped upon me by both women with a smile on my face. I never raised my voice, called anyone names, nor used any vulgar language. After the 5th unsuccessful session, the therapist called off the remaining sessions, citing unproductivity and a waste of time. After the unsuccessful counseling sessions, Tracy relentlessly tempted me with her body and presented me with copious erotic gyrations and dancing. I admit that she is a drop-dead gorgeous woman, an undeniable fact. However, I was still able to picture the asshole's cum running down her legs, rendering her antics repulsive. She all but screamed out her masturbatory orgasms from her open bedroom. Of course, I never showed any interest. She remained persistent. I'll give her that. The remaining months came and went with no change in the status quo. I continued spending every spare moment with Bobby and could tell that he felt the special bond I'd worked so diligently to forge. 4 days before the divorce hearing date, Tracy moved out of the house and took Bobby with her. I was also served with a restraining order to stay away from them both until our court date. B subsequently contacted me with 2 bombshells. I tried to warn you, Brian. She now claims that on 3 separate occasions, you forced yourself on her and raped her. She didn't report it at the time of the events because she had been hopeful for a reconciliation, saying it was a price she was willing to pay to keep her child in a 2-parent home. However, she says that the most recent time you demanded sex, she was feeling unwell and couldn't comply. Then you hit her in the face and raped her roughly yet again using a condom. Hospital records presented by her attorney show several bruises, vaginal tears, an obvious rough sexual treatment as evidence of the rape, and a busted lip where you'd hit her in the face. She's countersuing for full custody, allowing you only infrequent supervised visitation enforced by CPS. I'm afraid she's got you over a barrel. Is any of what she's alleging true? B, you know me way better than that. Not a single word of it is true, not one word. Okay, I just needed to hear you say it. I'll fight for you tooth and nail to the bitter end, but I have little hope of overcoming her allegations without incontrovertible evidence to support your denials. B. Has she provided the requisite details you indicated would be necessary to prosecute her allegations? Yes, she has. I have the details in a folder in my office. Can you email me the information her attorney has provided? Sure, for what it's worth. Now remember, you can't call her, email her, text her, or contact her or your son by any method until I tell you otherwise. Understand? Nothing. If she calls you and you hear her voice, don't say a word. Simply hang up immediately. Got it? She commanded. Got it, I echoed. 2 days later, as I entered the house after work, I was shocked to see Tracy sitting at the kitchen table. Her car was nowhere in sight. Perhaps she rode with someone else. She'd been waiting for me. I had no idea why. My first instinct was to run to avoid violating the restraining order, but she loudly called out to me before I made it out the door. Brian, turn around and listen to me if you ever want to see Bobby again. She certainly had my attention. Yet, endeavoring not to speak to her, I merely faced her and kept my distance. Cat got your tongue? She sarcastically inquired. Oh, I get it, the restraining order. Well, you don't have to say a word, just listen. I remained calm and made no gestures that could be misconstrued as violent or confrontational. Hand me your cell phone first so I can turn it off. I laid it on the kitchen table. She picked it up and turned it off to make sure there was no recording. She continued, I tried my best to entice you to come around, but you have been so stubborn I had to resort to desperate means. How does it feel with the shoe on the other foot? Doesn't feel good now, does it? I'm sorry, Brian, you left me no other choice. I had to claim incidences of sex between us that you demanded to reset the clock. But Elliot convinced me that I needed a backup plan just in case your attorney was convincing enough to argue against that. So I conjured up the story that you'd struck me in anger. We both know you never touched me. I told you before you'd never hit me in a million years, and I still believe that, even here and now. But I needed to make sure that I'd receive full custody of our son, leaving you only crumbs of time to spend with our little boy. It pains me to be so mean to you, Brian, but it places me in a unique position to negotiate with you. Tracy cleared her throat and went on. If you'll cancel the divorce, make it go away, and willingly consent to us joining our group of friends as they have generously offered, then I'll cancel the restraining order and move back here with you, and we can resume our happily married life. Bobby won't come from a broken home. He'll be raised by both parents, happily living under the same roof. Think about it, Brian. All the pussy you could ever want from a group of the sexiest women alive? What's not to like? I promise you that you'll get used to it in no time. I'd be delighted to show you the new tricks I've already learned right here and now if you were willing. Perhaps that would be too much too soon. What do you say, Brian? Will you climb down off your high horse and live in the real world with me for a change? You'll have the time of your life, I swear. I looked her directly in her eyes. I allowed her the impression that I was seriously considering her offer. So if I go along with you and your friends, you're saying you won't restrict my access to Bobby in any way? Now, why in the world would I ever want to come between a loving father and his son? You know as well as I do the kid loves you better than me. He asks for you constantly, and it breaks my heart to keep him from you. Just say yes, Brian. Just say yes, and all of our problems will go away, she encouraged. First I lost you, then I lost my son. My life's unbearable. I miss Bobby like crazy. I want to be with him so badly, I cried. Just one word from you will fix it all, Brian, and all will be restored, she urged. Give me some time to think it all through. I need to perform some mental gymnastics to figure out a way to share you with other men. I just need some time, okay? Okay, baby, I hear you. You always have to analyze everything with that engineering mindset of yours. We go before the judge in 2 days. I need to hear from you by tomorrow. Just text me one word, yes, so I'll know you're on board and I'll make everything right again. But if I don't hear from you before the hearing, then I'll punish you for the rest of your life. Your son will grow up hating you. I'll make sure of that, and you'll be paying me to do it. Please don't make me do that to you for Bobby's sake. Okay, sweetie, do the right thing for him. The bitch hit me where it hurts the most. My son. Nothing else in the world is as important to me as that little boy. I'll answer as soon as I can. Now please leave, I insisted. She walked by me with a smirk on her face. She knew she had me by the balls. I held my breath until I heard the door close. I looked out the window to see a shiny Lexus quickly pull up next to her. Asshole Elliot Franklin was driving, of course. He must have a huge heart-on for her to go to this much trouble to induct her into their group. I had a lot to consider. Tilde, 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 tilde. B informed me that my presence was not required at the divorce hearing. My presence would not alter the outcome, but I wanted to be there. As I exited the men's restroom to head into the courtroom, Tracy approached from nowhere and spewed, "You had your chance, you stupid moron. I'm gonna cut you to shreds in there. Your son will never know your name, and he'll grow up calling another man father. I'll marry a real man who isn't so insecure, who trusts and believes in me and our marriage, who is ready and open to new experiences, unlike you." Then she spits in my face and hastily walked away, drawing gasps from onlookers who wondered what heinous crime I'd committed against such a beautiful woman. I took my handkerchief and wiped my face. I only hoped that my attorney was half as good as her reputation as I entered the courtroom and took a seat in the back, awaiting my turn. It was a full docket for the day. It was interesting listening to some of the crazy divorce cases presented as I waited my turn. I noticed that the ones who represented themselves did indeed have fools for clients. Our case did not convene until 1 o'clock that afternoon, making for a long day. Tracy was called to testify first since she had filed the restraining order and levied the rape charges against me. The divorce was a minor issue, comparatively speaking. I listened intently as she testified to everything I'd been accused of, including dates, times, and specific locations of the alleged attacks. This was her slam dunk for custody, child support, alimony, and perhaps even jail time for me afterward because, oddly enough, formal charges had not yet been levied against me by the DA. I said nothing as she tearfully regaled her horrible rapes and beating at my hand. She eagerly provided lurid details of the sexual assaults that weren't even asked of her. My attorney silently drew pictures of flowers on the margins of the notes before her. Tracy's attorney skillfully weaved a coherent picture of my violent temper and unsuitability as a parent or guardian of a vulnerable toddler. He explained how Tracy had done everything in her power to reconcile before my most recent assault. She claimed that I falsely accused her of infidelity and that my jealousy had destroyed our marriage and our family. She now agreed that divorce was the best option for her and the child. Once her attorney had presented his case and rested, B smiled politely as she took her turn with Tracy. "I want to clarify and confirm for the record that you're absolutely certain of the dates, times, and locations of the attacks you allege Mr. Wilson to be culpable. Is there any way you could be mistaken, Mrs. Wilson?" B intently pressed. "No, ma'am. I'm crystal clear on that. My attorney had recommended that should any such types of things occur, it was imperative that I fully document the events for the record, and I wrote everything on a calendar that I kept hidden." "I see. So you're swearing under oath that the allegations you lodge against my client are accurate and correct?" "Yes, ma'am. I wish I could say otherwise, but the truth needs to be told." Tracy sniffed tearfully as she responded. "No further questions, Your Honor," B informed the judge. "You may step down, Mrs. Wilson." "Thank you," Judge Cora Feldman advised Tracy. She and her attorney seemed stunned that she was not being more thoroughly grilled by my attorney. Her smirk at me as she stood to exit the witness box told it all. She knew it was a slam dunk. Even my attorney had not challenged a single statement that she'd made. She was ready to deliver on her promise to me to turn my son against me. I winced at the thought. "Your Honor, I would like to call to the stand Mr. James McMahon," B requested. The judge nodded her approval, and an average nondescript man took the seat up front. Tracy and her attorney conferred, and she simply shrugged her shoulders. Apparently, he was unfamiliar to her. "Please state for the record your full name, please, sir," B asked. "James Winfred McMahon." "Thank you, Mr. McMahon. May I call you James?" "Jim, please call me Jim." "Of course, thank you, Jim. Would you tell the court where you work and the nature of your business?" "Yes, ma'am. I own and operate McMahon Investigation and Security Services." "Jim, would you please tell the court how you came to know my client, Mr. Wilson?" "Yes. He approached me about 14 months ago with concerns about his wife, Mrs. Tracy Wilson. He suspected infidelity but had no evidence. We offer private investigation services to confirm or refute such suspicions, and he engaged our services on the spot." "I see. And what did you discover during your surveillance period of Mrs. Wilson, Jim?" We were able to collect evidence of her infidelity and provided him with 3 photographs exposing her tryst with another man. Were the photographs you furnished him the only copies in existence of her tryst? No, ma'am. We maintain and store all photographs and recorded videos in secure cloud storage. We're painfully aware of the chain of evidence necessity and are fully licensed and bonded agents well respected by this and several other circuit courts. We have all the originals. Mr. Wilson was only provided copies. And do you have other copies of those same images with you, sir? Yes, I do, right here. I can certify that these are copies of undoctored originals. Thank you, Jim. Your Honor, if it pleases the court, we'd like to enter into evidence these 3 copies of original photographs taken by McMahon Investigation Services. The judge accepted the pictures, looked them over, nodded, and handed them to the bailiff for processing. Thank you, Your Honor. Now then, Jim, was that the extent of your association with Mr. Wilson? No, ma'am. He was concerned that her association with the unidentified gentleman might be an ongoing activity and asked me for suggestions to determine if it was an ongoing affair. I recommended to Mr. Wilson that we install concealed miniature surveillance cameras and microphones throughout his home that could be continuously monitored. Such devices could capture phone calls, clandestine meetings, and graphic imagery of infidelity. And did Mr. Wilson hire your firm to do that for him? Yes, ma'am. We installed the equipment the very next day while Mr. and Mrs. Wilson were both at work. Objection, Your Honor, Tracy's attorney complained. I see where this is going, and before it goes any further, I request that you rule any and all such evidence obtained from these despicable hidden cameras inadmissible. Mr. Wilson could have easily edited or modified any such recordings to make circumstances appear to suit his case and smear my client. This is unconscionable. Judge Cora Feldman listened to the objection and looked over at B. Before I enter my ruling on your objection, Counselor, I'd like to determine if there is a basis for it. Counselor Thorenson? Thank you, Your Honor. Jim, can you explain to the court the nature and type of surveillance system you installed in Mr. Wilson's home at his request? Certainly. The cameras all transmit wirelessly to a laptop computer concealed in the crawl space beneath the house. The laptop is connected to a wired Ethernet hub, which constantly feeds all collected data to our secure, protected cloud servers. Mr. Wilson does not have access to the raw recordings. The laptop doesn't maintain any local records or files other than the web address to which the streaming content is sent and stored. The only way Mr. Wilson or anyone else would have access to those files is through my firm. I strongly recommended this option to him to ensure that chain of evidence control was maintained at all times. We, of course, provide Mr. Wilson with information that we feel useful to him and apprise him of circumstances upon our review of the recordings. The total extent of Mr. Wilson's involvement with the system is to replace the tiny batteries in the camera transmitters monthly. Judge Feldman smiled at Jim and nodded. I've seen you in my courtroom before, Mr. McMahon. Your firm enjoys a stellar reputation. Objection overruled. Thank you, Your Honor, B said, pleased. Jim, you've heard testimony from Tracy Wilson accusing my client of rape and assault. She handed him a piece of paper. These are the dates and times of the alleged attacks as depicted by Tracy Wilson. In your opinion, Jim, do her allegations have any merit? No, ma'am, they do not. How can you be so sure, Jim? When your office provided us with these specific dates, times, and locations, my staff went back and reviewed the archived footage of the recordings captured from those dates and locations within Mr. Wilson's home. In every single instance, the recordings show a reasonably quiet home with Mr. Wilson happily playing with his son and Tracy Wilson off in another room of the house by herself. During the times of the alleged assaults, peace and quiet pervaded the Wilson household. Not a single instance of violence of any kind was observed in the captured video. Tracy and her attorney seemed interested in spots on the floor. There was no eye contact. Her case had been blown up. Jim, can you offer any further insight concerning the allegations she made against Mr. Wilson? Yes, ma'am, I can. I have here a transcript of a phone call made by Mrs. Wilson the day before she moved out. Of course, it is only her side of the conversation, but in it she clearly states that she hates having to do this to her husband, who she says she dearly loves, but having someone else beat her up so that she can claim it was him is patently obvious. She stated that she was going to use it as leverage against him to convince him to succumb to her wishes. Objection, Your Honor, hearsay, her attorney spat. I can provide the original recordings of her making all of these statements in her own voice if necessary, but this transcript is the mirror image of the words she spoke over the phone to someone, not her husband, Jim indignantly offered. Tracy's attorney sat down and offered no further objection. B said, "Thank you, Jim, for your expert testimony. No further questions, Your Honor," and she sat down. Judge Feldman looked over at Tracy's attorney. "Would you like to question this witness, counselor?" Defeated, he said, "No questions, Your Honor." Judge Feldman directed, "You may step down, Mr. McMahon. Thank you." After my PI took his seat, the judge continued. "I see what is going on here. An innocent man is being accused of crimes it is obvious to this court that he did not commit, in an effort to sway this court toward full custody of the child to the mother. In the process of doing so, Mrs. Wilson has perjured herself. Perjury is a felony of the third degree and could result in imprisonment of up to 36 months. The record of this hearing will be passed on to the district attorney for potential prosecution. I hope that he will bring charges against you, Mrs. Wilson. I hereby grant full custody of the child, Bobby Wilson, to his father, Brian Wilson. Tracy Wilson will have visitation rights at the discretion of Mr. Wilson. Mr. Wilson, I strongly advise you to be generous with the visitation. Your child needs to spend some time with his mother." I nodded my agreement to the judge. She went on. "Concerning alimony, I'm inclined to award none, given the ruthless nature Mrs. Wilson treated her husband. But I'm not bereft of compassion. Alimony, in the amount of $1,000 per month, due on the first of each month, is awarded to Tracy Wilson for a period of 3.5 years, or 42 months. Each of you will keep your respective vehicles. The checking and savings accounts will be evenly divided between the couple, referencing the balances that were in the accounts on the date the divorce petition was originally filed. Each party will keep their respective retirement accounts. Since Mr. Wilson will have primary custody, no child support will be awarded by this court. Mr. Wilson, as the custodial parent, I give you decision rights concerning your current residence. Do you wish to stay there or will you move?" I stood up. "Your Honor, I have no desire to live there a day longer than necessary. Tracy can continue renting the house if she wants. Either way, I'll be moving out." "Very well, Mr. Wilson. The lease of the current residence will be left to the discretion of Mrs. Wilson. Mrs. Wilson?" Tracy shakily rose to her feet. "You have a maximum of 8 hours to return the child to Mr. Wilson. If you refuse to comply, you will be found in contempt of court. Is that understood?" "Yes, Your Honor," she tearfully cried. "Very well," the judge granted. "I suggest you make arrangements to do so before leaving this building today. All restraining orders are rescinded, and I hereby grant the petition of divorce in the case of Wilson versus Wilson. You both should receive your divorce decrees within 30 days. Tracy was crying despairingly, realizing that she'd lost her family. She approached me to comply with the judge's orders. "If it's okay with you, Brian, I'll bring Bobby to you at the house after supper today. I'd like just a few more hours with him before I turn him over." "No need for that, Tracy. I was just waiting to see the outcome of these proceedings. I've already scoped out a new apartment and will have some of my friends help me move there as soon as I leave here." I handed her a slip of paper. "Here's the address of my furnished apartment. I'm only taking Bobby's things, my personal items and tools. You can have all the furniture. Bring Bobby to that address at noon tomorrow. I should be settled in by then." She sadly nodded at me. "For what it's worth, I'm sorry, really sorry. This is not the outcome I ever imagined." "Well, since life with me was so boring and humdrum, from now on you can have the exciting and fulfilling love life that you aspired to have, without me. Good luck with your next open marriage," I sarcastically asserted. She didn't respond in kind. "Brian, I want to thank you." "For what?" "For not going after Elliot and Gail Franklin. They're really wonderful people. It's a shame that you'll never know them as I do," she said appreciatively. "No problem. I have no interest whatsoever in either Elliot or Gail Franklin. As far as I'm concerned, they don't even exist to me. No, not Elliot or Gail. But I can tell you who I am interested in dealing with. The company where you work. I found out from your HR department that your company has a very strict non-fraternization policy in place because so many women work there, and they want to protect them from predators. Tomorrow I'll have your company served with a lawsuit claiming that blatant violations of their policy resulted in the destruction of my marriage, and almost cost me my son. Ronald Hensley will be named as the primary culprit. It seems that he has bedded over a dozen of the ladies who work there in violation of company policy. You may have heard of him. He's your manager. Tracy stood there in disbelief, mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. I continued. As it turns out, Ronald has a beautiful wife, Lydia, and 2 elementary school-aged children. I'm not sure if she knows about his antics screwing around with all those other women. But don't worry, I'll make sure she knows everything, including Rita Consuela, the woman he claims to have been married to for so long and his greatest love on earth. You might know her as Gail. But why? Why would you do this? His wife and children don't deserve to be destroyed like that, she pleaded. Why? He destroyed my marriage. Why shouldn't I destroy his? He almost cost me my son. Why shouldn't his children know the truth? Even now, still to this day, you defend and protect him. How enlightening. If you hang around for a while, Tracy, you just may be able to snag that man of your dreams, your lover extraordinaire. Something tells me he may be divorced within a year or less. The only downside to Loverboy is that he also may be unemployed very soon, along with all of your other group girlfriends at the call center. It seems that their silence in not calling out Ronald's despicable behavior is also in violation of company policy. You're going to get us all fired, but how will I support myself now? She argued. Oh, don't worry. Your job is safe. I promised your company that I wouldn't go public with this as long as they keep you on. Hey, just think, in time, you can start your own new slut group. I can only imagine how wonderful your life is going to be now that I'm no longer in the way holding you back. Once you explain to them how slutting around enhanced our marriage, I'm sure that the ladies will be chomping at the bit to join you. You might have a tough time recruiting another manager. Perhaps one of the other husbands will take over the leadership role. Just think of all the new exciting possibilities, I enthused. But why would you protect my job and get everyone else fired? She blurted. For one reason and one reason only, Tracy. I agree with the judge that Bobby needs his mother in his life. It's not exactly a dream job and it doesn't pay very much, but it's enough for you to live on without coming to me for money. One day when he asked me how I treated you in the divorce, I want to be able to honestly say I was fair. If you tell him differently, I'll show him the proof. What Tracy nor any of her friends knew was that I had already known her lover's real name since day one. My private investigator is quite good at his job and is worth every cent he charges me. An engineer always approaches a problem from a position of knowledge. If we don't have an answer, find someone who does. That's what we do. B, my shark attorney, sued Tracy's call center for $1.5 million and settled for a cool $1 million. She kept $250,000 and I received the rest. On the day I received the settlement check, I wrote Tracy a check for $42,000 in one lump sum. My alimony obligation was paid in full by her own company with a lot left over. I could now build my dream house. Word spreads quickly through the workplace. Quite a few of the single ladies where I work are eyeing me as potential prey. But after just getting off this roller coaster marriage ride, I think I'll focus on Bobby for a while before jumping back into the dating pool. Free at last.